Great. Okay, perfect. So I want to make this a little bit interactive per usual, but I also want to get across a lot of ideas. So it might feel more like webinar-y, but I'll stop in places and be able to, ask you all questions and open it up to discussion. I talked to Marina, I might consider using this as a podcast episode. So you all tell me at the end if you feel comfortable with that. I'll just decide afterwards if it feels like a viable podcast episode. But if you don't want it to be public, just let me know, and that's fine.
I wish you'd tell me before I was eating on your recording.
Oh, that's fine. We can always edit out.
It's too late now. I'm just going to keep going and try not to drop anything out of my mouth.
Yeah, and we can always edit out comments too. So it's just up to all of your comfort zones. All right, so I'm going to dive in. So self-sabotage. What I want to do first is I want to define it, and then I want to talk about how to recognize self-sabotage in yourself and give some examples, and then talk about ways to work with it and work around it. And anyone who's worked with me knows that this whole process of self-improvement and evolution is never something to use to judge yourself or to decide, oh, if only I had those tools, I would have done things differently, or to regret where you are. I think you all know at this point that we're starting from here, and everything that's happened to get us here is really important and it all matters. And so we're starting from here, and there's no regrets and there's no judgment. So if you start looking at patterns or thought patterns or noticing things, just, never use it against yourself. Just recognize it, have awareness, have curiosity, but don't ever use it as a tool to beat yourself up, which I've been known to do too, but we want to make sure it's like a clean slate, and we're learning and we're growing and we're evolving. So what is it? What is self-sabotage? So I have this amazing book, and we're putting together a book list. Marina and I, like my summer reading list. This book is 100% at the top of it. It may be a little bit hard to get in the Netherlands. Like I looked on Bol and I couldn't find it. So you might need to look on Amazon to find this author. But this book is, like, to me, the quintessential starting point for trying to understand your own patterns with self-sabotage. So it's called The Mountain Is You. It's Brianna Wiest. I really love her. I follow her on Instagram too. And every day it's just quotes from her books, and they're all gems. I mean, I just think she's amazing. So that's the starting point, is just, if you want to do some further reading, I think that this book is amazing. But I like the whole premise that she starts with, like, there's a mountain in front of you and nobody put that mountain there, right? Like, we can't blame anybody else for creating this mountain for us. And these roadblocks we have to get over, like, it's really up to us. And we put these roadblocks in front of us for all different reasons, right? We create problems for ourselves for a variety of different reasons. So again, we want to look at what roadblocks we're putting in front of us. And we just want to think of it like, oh, wow, look at what my brain is cooking up. Like, look at what my brain is doing, because all of the self-sabotage is there to keep you safe. So again, we don't have to look at it like, why am I doing this? What's wrong with me? Is anyone else doing this? We're all doing it. We all have our own version of self-sabotage, and we do it because we really feel like it's keeping us safe. And that's a good reason, right? So we're not going to be 100% ready to make a shift tomorrow. But if we have the awareness, we'll be able to slowly, incrementally, like, get ourselves over the mountain. And then pretty soon it's going to be behind us, and there will be a new one, but we'll never have to climb that one again. And that one might be the biggest one. Like, that's the advantage. Sometimes there will be smaller mountains, and depending on how big your dreams are and how big your goals are, some of those mountains might be bigger. But we'll get there, right? And there's no sense of urgency. This is the process. So self-sabotage, if we look at defining it, is really like reconciling old, outdated beliefs you have about yourself with whoever you need to become to allow yourself the thing that you want. And so in between those two places of your old, outdated beliefs and the new beliefs you're going to build is this kind of chasm in between. And while you're going from one to the other, there's going to be a lot of, backtracking. There's going to be a lot of falling, but we just have to allow that and know that there is a chasm between where we were and what we believed and where we're going. So here's an example that we hear about all the time. People winning the lottery, right? So overnight, you get this incredible amount of money that you've never had before in your life. So somehow, because you've never had that money, there's quite possibly a belief that I'm not good with money, or I don't know what to do with money, or I don't know how to make money, or I've never had money. There's a series of old beliefs. The people that win the lottery don't have time to fix or solve for or look at those beliefs. They get forced to change, right? And so what do we see happen? They end up spending all the money, right? Because they have this belief. They have this old, outdated belief. They don't have time to change it. This thing happens in their life that forces them to change it. But they don't. So they basically self-sabotage, right? They get this abundance of money that could potentially protect them into the future, but most of the times it's gone within a year. And it's literally because they just haven't changed that belief system. They haven't gone from, I don't know how to handle money, to I know how to handle money. They haven't solved for that. They haven't put the steps in place of like what it means to be the person who knows how to manage money. There wasn't enough time. So they keep getting themselves back to their comfort zone, to their known beliefs, to create evidence for those beliefs, even though they're outdated and they're not serving them anymore. They do all the things to keep themselves there. So, and we see it time and time again, right? Like this is just something that's very common. I think it's like 90% of lottery winners spend the money in the first year. So it's just that, right? It's not that there's anything wrong with them or they're not smart. It's just that they have created a belief system about themselves through their whole life that somebody's asked them to change overnight. And it's really hard to do that. So the first thing we need to know about ourselves is like, what are the patterns that we have of self-sabotaging? Where do we want to go that we're not allowing ourselves to get to? Excuse me, God, this me and my throat clearing. So what are the blocks that we put in our way because we're keeping that old belief alive? We have to get honest with ourselves about what that belief is. Like, what have we been holding on to that we're afraid to let go of because it's been keeping us safe? And then what patterns are we putting in place to keep that pattern alive also? So one thing that I'm sure all of you can relate to, and I think all of my clients can relate to, is like having a job that feels toxic, that feels overwhelming, that doesn't feel aligned, that doesn't feel like a good fit, that's burning you out, right? I think we've all had some version of that in our lives. And a lot of people keep that going, right? There's a pattern there and they just go from job to job to job to job, like recreating that pattern. Why? Because there's some fear, right? Fear about quitting the job and the financial piece. There's a fear about identity shift, right? Your identity is tied to that job, to that role. There's a fear about letting go of that, right? So there's all these fears. And then what happens is you subconsciously create situations at work, and not to like put all the blame on us, but it's quite possible that we might create some situations at work so that we don't have to feel the pain, right? We create these situations so we don't have to look at the pain over here of the fear or the identity shift or all the things that we're not ready to look at. So we just keep ourselves in this pattern, and then sometimes we sabotage ourselves inside of those situations. We make it harder on ourselves because we don't really want to be there. So that things come up, right? And we create situations because we don't want to look at the other feelings. So I think relationships, this happens a lot too. So you might want to be alone, right? Like your ultimate goal is to be alone. So you're in a relationship and then you just kind of create situations in that relationship because you really want to be alone. So you're sort of forcing the relationship to end instead of just addressing the fact that maybe I actually do want to be alone because you're afraid to be alone, right? It's like you want something, you don't think you're capable of having that thing or that you're strong enough to handle it. And so you kind of continue to create a pattern to keep yourself stuck, more or less. Keep yourself in that space because you haven't created a belief system that allows you to know that, like, if I'm alone, I'm good. Like, I'll be fine. If I quit my job, I'm okay. I've created a plan and I know how I'm going to get there and it's going to be fine, right? We just haven't reconciled that chasm between our old beliefs and what we are truly capable of, or believing into what we're capable of, or who we need to be able to get that thing. So I'm going to pause it there. And I am curious if any of you, knowing we're going into this call, have any patterns that you've recognized of self-sabotage that you're like, oh yeah, I see that pattern, or I saw it in the past, like I broke that pattern, I had that pattern in the past. Anything that you can think of that's sort of a self-sabotaging behavior?
I'll
Raina.
go. I just started taking notes on writing a testimonial for you, Jamie, full disclosure, because I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I think this is what we did together." Like, looking back on how you and I worked together, I'm like, "Oof, you're hitting on some big ones." So, highlights, yeah, I think for me, breaking the pattern of working in, some really toxic environments and thinking that that was not only okay, but that's what I should be doing. Um, and yeah, I mean, it was working with people who just honestly weren't the right fit for me. Um, and therefore I wasn't the right fit for them either, but somehow just making it work and sacrificing a lot and frankly burning myself out. Like I think I came to you in very much verge of, if not already in burnout. And just because I don't think I knew how to get out of my own way and actually start working with people and doing things that I enjoyed instead of thinking I had to stay in such toxic workplaces because that's all I had and that's all I knew.
Yeah. Yeah. Huge. And is there anything that you felt like you might have been doing when you were in those work environments and you weren't allowing yourself to believe you could get out of them? Do you feel like there was anything you were doing inside of those jobs? And I think like it doesn't have to be something that like you're doing to yourself that feels bad. It can be something that feels good. Like I think sometimes I would like overwork thinking
Hmm.
that was a way to solve the problem. You know what I mean? Like it feels productive, but it's really like a pattern that I was in. Like, is there any pattern that you recognized that you kind of took from job to job before you
Oh,
allowed this?
100%. Yeah, yeah. I was very much over 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 promising, over delivering. um to the point that I was working way too many hours and I just I would make the excuse of, well, I want to make sure it's perfect. So in a lot of ways perfectionism got in my way and I was doing things that I thought needed to happen when in reality nobody really asked me to do them. I was just kind of creating more work, for myself. And yeah, if you work 60 hours for, X amount, you're not, and you're only getting paid for 20, it doesn't really even out.
Yes. Yes. I think that's great. And I think what I'll talk about later too is this idea of like there's the pattern and then there's like the belief underneath of that, like a layer down. And I think it's like for
Mhm.
you, it's like proving people pleasing a little bit, like the
Mhm.
perfectionism is underneath the over promising, right? And then the over promising sort of creates its own system, right? Where you're like you're over
Mhm.
promising and then you're overworking and then you're over perfecting and then it's all because there's some other belief system under there, right? That you
Yeah.
want to look at.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you, Marina. Really
Mhm.
helpful. Lisa, I saw you went off mute. You want to share?
Yeah, sure. It probably wouldn't surprise you. I just had this belief, it just seems to be inborn, that when you need to get stuff done, the best way that you can achieve that is to just do more work. Um, and when I was younger, I didn't know any different, and that's what I did, and it didn't really work always. Sometimes it did. Um, but now I know better, and I just don't believe that at all. I don't believe that always doing more work is the way to achieve things. Sometimes you just have to get on with it, but usually it just doesn't really help. But that's always where I go to, like, naturally, um when the mountain starts to emerge. I was just thinking when you were saying the mountain, actually, like, what happens if you have like 5 mountains? Anyway, that's something else. But yeah, I tend to just try to solve it by doing more and not stopping. Stupid, but I do it, and I don't always see it if I get tired.
Right. Yeah. Yes. And again, like if we're thinking that it's a sabotaging behavior, right? Then you're overworking to try to surmount the mountain, but then the
Yeah,
mountain's getting bigger because you're adding more work to it, right?
yeah. Well, and you have less energy to get up it, regardless of how high it is, because you're just tired.
Yeah. And then at
Yeah,
some point you look at it and it feels insurmountable because your solution is to keep working. And
yeah,
then at some point it's like, well, I can't keep working. I've already used all the hours that I have to be able to do this. And so I think that's
yeah,
why it feels like it's a self-sabotage behavior, right? Because
yeah.
there's no
I-
end in sight.
yeah. I just have this, like, it's something like no pain, no gain thing. That's my mental game plan. But I mean, what I learned, if I'm thinking and if I'm smart, I learned that you don't always have to go over the mountain, right? You can go around the mountain sometimes, or over that bit and then around that bit. And there are many ways up that mountain, or across the mountain, let's say.
Right.
Uh, but yeah, I don't. If I don't think about it consciously, then I just sometimes just try to go the long way with hard work, and it's not always the best way.
Right. Exactly. And that's why these are patterns, right? Because we've used that, like you've used that work ethic, you've used that style of working throughout your life and it served you. It
Yeah,
worked.
it did. There's a lot of situations when it's worked really well, and it still does sometimes.
Yeah.
I'm getting better at knowing when to use it and when not to. But as I
Yeah.
say, if I am not conscious of it, then I can yeah, just lose track and just end up in this, like, what am I doing? I'm just working, I'm active, feel very productive, but actually I'm not making much progress. And that's when I'm in that self-sabotaging behavior, I guess.
Yeah. It's so great. And it's great that you have awareness. And that's why, too, it's like it's this chasm of here to there because it's not going to change overnight. You have to have awareness and then see when it's happening and then understand the difference between when it serves you and when it doesn't. Like it takes some
Yeah,
time, but the awareness is the first most important piece to it.
yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
And
Angela, I saw you took yourself off mute.
yes, I can relate to what Marina was saying, and like for me, I had a limiting belief, I guess. So for some reason I saw myself as like a little girl, and when I landed in a professional environment, I just felt like I had to prove that I'm not a little girl. And I just always felt like I had so much to prove. And so it drove me into all kinds of wrong decisions because I always had more to prove. And I had to prove that and people that do the job, I can do the job better than anybody else. I can do the job better than the men, better than the really better than anyone. And this is like there's no limit to what you can try to prove yourself. So it really took me to very, very wrong decisions and limitless over promising and just trying to go above and beyond really everywhere. And also it seemed it was perceived as like drive and passion for the work because that comes across to people like, oh, this person's really motivated and they're super passionate and very driven. And I was in a way, but I was fueled by the wrong things basically. And it was when I detached my identity and my worth from like where I was in my career and what my role was that everything started coming into balance. And now I can enjoy working and I can also enjoy being myself without these things really going into each other. And that's why going into burnout was so hard because I just felt like a failure. I failed at work, but then it's like I couldn't even imagine like what people would think, So yeah, this was this was a big mountain, but being on the other side was the only way to see it. Basically, I really couldn't see it when I was in front of it, under it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and that's amazing. And that's what helped get you through burnout, right? That you were able to see it and break the pattern and not go back to continuing to do it because it is a way of like you're sort of beating yourself up. But I think there's so much of that external reinforcement for these behaviors, right? Especially for like high achieving, driven, ambitious women, we
Yes.
end up in these environments where we do feel like that provey worthiness piece. Like I need to show up a certain way and I need to go, go, go. And I need to make sure everybody knows it. And then our identity is tied to working that way because we
Yes.
just don't see another way.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then you're the star and there's nowhere to go. You're trapped into your own little expectation. So, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, again, that's kind of that, there's this old belief, which is basically like, I need to work as hard as I possibly can to prove myself. And then there's this place over here where it's like success means I have to be that, right? Like, and so that's the chasm. How do I have success without that way of working that defined me? That's like the river of misery that we have to like wade through and understand and not judge ourselves as we get through that so that we can understand that success doesn't have to look like that anymore. But we have to do a lot of experimenting and looking at that pattern really closely and getting really honest about it. That's nobody else's fault, right? I think that's the first piece to it. It's like, no one else put me here. I created this. Nobody asked me to work 70 hours a week or prove myself, right? Like we think they're asking for it, but they're really not asking for it. But that's the awareness piece of like, I have the awareness and now I have to create new beliefs that allow me to have this success over here without doing it the old way that I used to do it, that used to really hurt me, that caused me pain. Did I put my hand up? It's so weird. I think that was like AI picking up on my my hand gestures. Ryan, I know you're here. I don't know if you're just listening.
Yeah,
Possibly.
I can talk a little bit. I actually have to hop off on a meeting. It's nice to hear that everyone's through this because I'm currently in the middle of it. So it's nice to hear that there is another side. Um, I think for me, I'm in a very toxic work environment, and I think a lot of my self-sabotage comes from almost me not wanting anyone to know that I'm miserable. So I put in the extra work, or I do all this extra stuff almost to like mask how I feel from other people. And that's sort of kind of what I'm in the middle of right now. And I also say yes to everything. And I'm, as Jamie knows, learning to try to say no more often to people, to set those boundaries for myself.
Yeah. Yeah. And well, I know you have to jump off, Ryan, but you can watch the recording too. But yeah, I think it's, you know, we're in the process of like building a new belief system, right? Like what's possible for you if you ask for the help, right? Or if you let people know that you need it, or you need to set boundaries, you know, what does that mean about you? That's the first thing we have to really look at. Like, what do you think that means about you?
Yeah, exactly. And I'm one who does not like help from other people. So learning that it's okay to have help and to, and I've been connected with Marina, who's been very helpful too through Jamie. So it is nice to know that you don't have to do it all on your own to figure out how to work through some of this stuff too.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. That's why I love this. I love this group. So amazing. So we see those patterns, and Ryan, if you need to jump off, just whenever you need to jump off, it's fine. So again, there's this awareness between like old beliefs, old version of yourself, and then what needs to change, what patterns need to change to get you to your new version. I think money is a place where it's easy to look at that as a pattern, because everybody has a relationship to money and everybody's relationship to money is different. And I think sometimes for me, it's an easier example to use because it's not as wrought with the emotions of work or the emotions of how we're conducting our lives. But I think sometimes it's interesting to look at, like, I have some clients who will say, okay, I'm kind of in this money crunch. Like I'm in a money crunch and I'm trying to run a business, but I feel like I can't do it. I feel like I need to go back to work. Like I've heard this from a few different people. And so it's like, I need to go back to work. I'm going to, close down the business. And it's really just a financial decision. And then we'll talk about, well, where's the money going? And then what happens is they're like, well, I signed up for a course. And then I signed up with this person who's like a money coach. And then I'm working with you. And then I also signed up for this other thing. So when you look at it, they're like trying to solve their problem, but they're doing it by spending money, right? So there's all this money going out for like support and coaching and courses and all these things. And it's like, okay, well, let's look at that. Like, why do you think that all the answers are out there? Right. And so they're not associating their financial issues with the fact that and some of these people too are spending, these are not like €100 courses. Like people are spending like tens of thousands of euros on these courses and workshops and retreats and things to like solve the problem of spending money, which I just, so, and they just can't see it. Like there's just not the connection of, oh, right, I'm spending money thinking I'm solving the problem. And again, I think it's just an easy example to use because it's so clear, right? We can see it really clearly from the outside. Like you just spent 10,000 euros and you don't have 10,000 euros to spend. So this is where we have to get really honest with ourselves. Like if my belief says I'm not good with money and I want to be someone who's good with money, what is the thing I really have to get honest about? Where am I spending money where I should think about paring back? What is my habit? I think one of the things as I was going through these exercises for myself of like, what's a thing, like what's a pattern? Because we're all expats, we might have this pattern in common too. I think I have a pattern where I'm like, maybe I need to move. I think this is like my go-to pattern is like, oh, things are getting hard. Oh, I don't have a big community. Oh, I don't have, whatever it is. Oh, I should move. Like, and it's kind of my go-to. Not that I move like every year, but I think I move enough where I can realize that there's a pattern to this. Like, what am I not looking at? What am I not being honest with myself about? What am I using the excitement of a move and all the planning and all the things that go into a move, what am I trying to avoid by putting all my time and effort into that, right? Like fresh start, something new, something to plan. There's a part of my patterning that's avoiding something. So when you're looking at this self-sabotage behavior, like it might not be that obvious, right? We've kind of identified that amongst ourselves. It might not be something that's like, hitting you like a bolt of lightning. It might be something where it's like, oh, interesting that I keep going to that place. Like I keep going to this pattern of like, maybe I should just move. Maybe that's the solution. And so get really honest with yourself. If you're ready to evolve to the person that's doing the things that you want to be doing and has the things that you want to be having, we have to be really honest. Like, what is the pattern I'm not ready to look at? What's the thing I need to lean into and feel because this self-sabotaging behavior is getting in the way? It's like distracting me from the real work over here. And then we want to look at that deeper reason, right? Like what is underneath that? Like so if I'm moving all the time, what am I avoiding? Like what's the layer down from that? So it's moving, it's avoiding, it's not wanting to like resolve whatever's right in front of me. Well, why? What am I afraid of? What's the thing that's underneath that? Like, am I afraid of being alone? Like, am I afraid of doing hard work? And am I afraid of taking things to a phase or to a level that I've never been at before? Right? Like, why? Why am I afraid of that? Like, what's the thing that I'm not looking at? There's always that first layer, and then there's that subconscious layer. Like, what is it that I'm truly avoiding? We just want to unearth that and again, look at it without judgment and be curious about that. That's the only way we can start to shift beliefs and ideas and self-sabotaging behaviors is by being really honest. And I think, I talk a lot about this idea of like blaming other people. I think the toxic work environment situation is the perfect example too of like, it's so easy to say, it's the company, it's my boss, it's my coworkers. And I'm not saying that that's not true. There's definitely a percentage of that is circumstantial, that's creating some of the desire to make a shift. But we also have to look at what am I not allowing myself to do in this situation? Why do I feel powerless in this situation? Why am I not asking for help or setting boundaries or doing the things I need to do to set myself up better in this situation? So, and again, like sometimes the circumstances are stronger, right? I don't want to totally dismiss the fact that there's not, that there are things happening, but also like we don't have to take them all on if they're not ours, right? If they're not ours to take on, if it's not our business, we're working for someone else, it's not our company, we don't have to solve all the problems. They're not our problems to solve, right? We don't always have to take the burden of that on. So be honest with yourself, like the money, the work environment, the overworking, like whatever the pattern is, just be honest. And then the next big step here to really working through this is knowing what you want. And this is really hard for people because they're like, I don't know what I want. I know I don't want that, but I don't know what I do want. And when I start working with people, this is kind of our first focus. And I think Marina, like we did a lot of work in this area too. It's like, there's something that you want, you just don't believe that you can have it. And this is so related to the behaviors that start to emerge too. So if you want to quit your job and you want to start a business, if that's a dream, right? Admit it to yourself, like say it out loud. This is probably work you had to do too, Lisa. Like, okay, I'm in this work environment. I know I want this thing. I just don't know what it means. I don't know how to get there. So the first step in this is just let yourself believe it. Like you don't have to do anything with it. We're not quitting jobs. We're not starting anything new here. It's just Write it all down, like get it all out on paper, say it out loud, admit to yourself it's something that you want. Because if you don't, you're going to keep sabotaging yourself over and over because there's this thing you want and you don't believe you can get it. And there's just pain in between. So let yourself just at least admit it to yourself. So you want to quit your job? Be honest about that. I want to quit my job. Angela, I want to close down my business. Okay. I'm going to put that down on paper. I'm going to say it out loud. I want to close down my business. If you like, I think something I worked on a lot with Rachel is like, I want to be an artist. That's a really hard thing to reconcile. There's a lot of self-sabotaging behavior that happens at work when all you really want is to be an artist, right? So you need to really like allow yourself all the possibility without cutting yourself off just because you don't identify with that yet. Just allow yourself to say it out loud. That's the first and foremost thing to getting over the self-sabotaging behavior, because it's like we see the pattern, we know there's some subconscious reason. And then the third layer is there's probably something else that we want here that we don't believe we can have. And we have to admit that to ourselves too. We have to get honest about that. You want to be alone? You don't want to be in a relationship? Just allow yourself to say it out loud, right? It doesn't mean that we're 100% going to go in that direction, but if you don't know what those things are, or you're not letting yourself admit it to yourself, you're not letting yourself potentially like inhabit that new identity, it's always going to be there, like knocking on the door until it's not. And then that's sad, but it's going to be knocking and you're going to be trying to deny it. And you're going to try to suppress it and it's going to keep knocking. And there's going to be pain trying to avoid it. So get those things out. I'm going to mute myself and do some throat clearing. Sorry about that. Okay. So get clear on what you want and then dive into what this new thing might mean. What does it mean? What comes up for you? Okay, I want to move. What is that going to require? What are the compromises that are going to have to happen? Like, what are all the things? Like, get realistic about it. It might feel like a dream, but there's also some real work that needs to get done between here and there. So note some of those things too. Like, what are the things that feel really difficult about it? Because again, there's this identity or this feeling that I'm going to have to work really hard to make that happen. And we know that's not true. There's an old belief about work. And if your old belief is that it's going to be insurmountable how much work it's going to take to get there, you're never going to start. So at least write down very realistically what that might mean. Like, okay, what are the actual first steps? You don't have to know the whole roadmap, but like, okay, if I was going to quit my job, what are the first 3 things I would need to do? I would need to know that there's another potential job out there for me. I'd need to start sending out applications, right? Like, what are those first 3 things? Because once you see what those first 3 things are, you realize they're probably not as big and insurmountable as you initially thought. You need to get real about those too, because we can just let our brain spin on all the reasons we shouldn't do the thing. But again, the knocking is still going to happen. The suppression's still going to happen. The pain's going to be there. So just look at what are those first 3 things that could maybe get the ball rolling. What would you need to change? This is a question I ask everybody in my intakes, right? What would need to change about you? And people are always like, I don't know what that means. What is this person and what is this person and what's that chasm in between? Like, what needs to change? Is it a belief? Is it a behavior? Is it a routine? Is it a relationship? Like, is there something that you can identify that's like, I don't know how to change it. I don't know how I'm going to get there yet, but I do know that I need to get comfortable being alone, right? Or I do know that I need to get comfortable with fear. I need to get comfortable with instability. I need to get comfortable with risk. There's something happening over here that's going to need to shift. What's that thing? It's not, you're not going to be able to identify it in a second, but you have an instinct. You want to go from working a 9-to-5 job to being an artist. Who is this person over here? Is it a belief, right? Is it something like a proof point? Like I need to sell one piece of art to really feel like I'm an artist. What's the thing? You don't have to do it right now, but what is that thing that's going to make you believe that this is possible? So then once you've identified what you want, allowed yourself to say it out loud, identified those first 3 steps that it might take to get there, gotten honest about what that is, understood who you need to be over here, then, as you all know, then it's time to jump into the deep end, right? Then it's time to just do something, like do one thing towards that new place, right? And Lisa, I've thrown you into the deep end over and over, right? Like just try this thing on, just try this thing on. Like, let's push your comfort zone a little bit, just try it on. Once you try it on, you can decide to take it back off, right? If you want to write a book, just write. Don't worry about what the 25th step is. This is how we start to create change. We don't have to do it all. We don't have to do the exact right thing first. We just have to do one thing to start the ball rolling. You want to write a book? Write a page, right? You want to start a business? Identify what your offer will be, right? Like, what's that first thing you want to try to sell? You don't have to do the business plan and the research and the testing and all these things. Just do one thing. Maybe it's of the list of 3 things you identified. Maybe it's something else. We want to pull back on the perfection piece. We want to pull back on the, this is going to make me money. We want to pull back on the, this is, going to get me here in 5 days. Like, no sense of urgency, no need to have a proof point. It's just, I'm going to take one step towards this thing. I'm just going to try it. I'm just going to see how it feels. I'm just going to put it on. It's like testing out the new identity. I'm going to believe that like I can just work on a piece of art and I'm not going to worry about whether it's good or not. I'm just going to work on something because I get a lot of gratification and satisfaction out of working on it. That part feels good. This is the whole, like, the journey is the destination philosophy, right? It's like, we know we're on a road. It's not about how long the road is or how long it takes us to get to the end of the road. It's really that like every step forward is a step forward. It doesn't matter that it's this choice to do this thing or the choice to do this thing. It's that we're always moving forward, and every step is a learning, right? Every step is a chance to try it on and to see how it feels, and then to take the next step, right? So we don't get overwhelmed with, here's the mountain and we have to surmount it. It's that all I need to do is just take a step. And to Lisa, your point, it's either going to help get me closer to being around the mountain, or it's a step to the top of the mountain, or it's a step maybe sometimes in the other direction. Maybe it's like, I don't need to climb that mountain right now. That's not my mountain to climb. I'm going to go this way for a while. It's still forward movement because you turn around and you're going in a different direction. You're not going backwards. You're just turning around, and your new forward is going north instead of south where the mountain is, right? So it's not getting overwhelmed with the being perfect or what it means about me, right? I'm going to ask for help because I want to try on a new identity. I'm going to start asking for help at work, right? There's going to be an old belief that means I'm not capable. I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy. I'm not good at my job, right? But we're going to try it on. We're going to ask for some help because we know over here we want to be somebody who's very comfortable asking for help because it's going to get us further in our careers, right? So it's just try it on. How does it feel? How does it feel to ask for help? What's the thing you want to do? Okay, it feels okay. Like nothing, I didn't die. Nobody was hurt in the process. So I'm going to ask for help one more time. So it doesn't have to be this huge thing like, okay, I'm starting a business and now I have to do this. It's like, it's really about identity shift. I don't want to cause myself pain. I want to allow myself to believe there's a new identity over here that I'm allowed to live into. I'm going to try these things on see how they feel, and then keep moving towards it. But if you don't, if you stay still, if you stay stagnant, if you stay in the pain, right, this dream will be out there knocking forever, and it will cause you additional pain because you didn't even allow yourself the trial, right? Like let me just try this on. I don't think anyone here has that problem at all, right? You all are here, right? You're committing to this forward momentum. But there might be a new mountain, right, that comes up that you see on the horizon that is going to challenge you to look even deeper because you know what the surface level self-sabotage behavior is now. There's going to be something that comes up. So just, these are tools to look out for it. But I think you all are very aware of these patterns for yourself. And we're working through finding new ones all the time, right? But I think that there's also that like celebrate that you even did that one first step. I think that's probably where I help you all the most is like, let's recognize that this one step was huge and has the ability to even change your identity going from 1 to 1.5, right? Like you're starting to shift your belief about yourself every time you take a step, and we need to celebrate even the smallest steps because it just means that you're committing to the forward movement, and that's huge and super, super important. All right, I've been talking a lot. Any last thoughts or ideas that anybody wants to talk through in our last few minutes? Is it all making sense? Is it resonating? There's a little nugget.
It's a hungry one, so
Oh. Well, go ahead and get him some food, Angela.
yeah. Yes, I have to
I
go.
can hear her.
Yeah, she's talking.
I can hear you too. Wow.
Thank you for today. Thank you.
Oh.
This was lovely.
Thanks, Angela. Take care.
Bye.
Have a good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Oh,
So cute.
Super cute. No, what I was gonna say is I think that it's something that you said a long time ago, Jamie, was like when we very first started working together, was the idea that you ended on really of just taking that first step. And it's the only way to get over the hurdle of the thing, right, is to actually do the thing. So if your analogy of writing a book, I'm very much not a writer, but if that's the analogy, and the only way to write a book is to start with the first paragraph or a first page. And the proof that you can actually do it starts to take away some of that scary feeling. And she's not here to talk for herself, but Rachel and I were talking a while ago about how she started sketching, like doing a drawing every day. And I thought that was just such a brilliant step because she's like, some days I don't feel like it, some days I do, but I still do it because it proves that I can. And that's probably one of my one of the things that's helped me the most in overcoming some of these mountains and for myself is just doing one small thing, and it proves that it works.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's great. I mean, I'm so glad that you're able to take those steps too, Marina. Like, it's amazing. It's been, and that's what's so fun, like working with you. I mean, especially with you both, is seeing you recognize something like that and then seeing you make that shift, right? Like all the boundary setting that you've done, Marina, and all the work you've done with your one big client.
Yeah,
It's so huge, right? And it just proves to you that you can, and that the world's not going to fall apart if you set a boundary, right? That like you're creating evidence to support that people are actually like happy about your boundaries. Like they want you to have boundaries. They want you to advocate for yourself, and you're seeing the evidence to support that, which is like a beautiful thing.
Yeah. No, I think this was a big topic today. I hope everybody watches, because I think we all definitely have many, many mountains. Like you said, Lisa,
Yeah.
one mountain? I see quite a few.
Yes.
It's like it feels like the Himalayas sometimes, with the mountain range, but
Right.
Yes. Exactly. Yeah. Lisa, do you have any last thoughts?
Just when I said the Himalayas, I was like, oh, I feel like maybe I'm getting towards the foothills now. That's okay. They're a bit more manageable. No, it's just like I've been talking, it's been reminding me of things that we've, talked about in the last 6 or 7 months. I'm like, oh, is that what she was doing? And it made me remember one thing in particular. It might have been our very first intake call, and you made me. You were trying to get me to say, I think, like, what is it that you want to be, and I couldn't articulate it. So you said, how do you want to feel when you wake up in the morning? I think that was how you got to it. I remember that, just thinking like, oh my God, I don't want to feel like, I have to do these 3 things today anymore. I just want to wake up and think, yes, today I can do whatever. And I've forgotten about it, actually. And I am doing that more often. I'm really pleased with myself. Yeah.
Yeah.
I enjoy doing this. But
Yeah.
I suppose that was I suppose there are a few ways that you can kind of get people to articulate what they want to do or be or feel like, or yeah.
Yeah.
I found that, yeah, I did find that very hard to work out.
Yeah. And it's hard when people feel stuck too. I mean, I think a lot of people come to me because they're like, I don't know the answers to these questions. I need you to help me figure them out, But I think the feeling is a big part of it, because why do we want money? Because we want to feel safe. Like, why do we want a better job? Because we want to feel successful, right? Like, there's a feeling underneath the thing we want usually. And so if we can find a way into that feeling, what opens up for us when we're like, oh, well, how does success feel? Like, why do I have to wait?
Well, I think the biggest part of it too is when you're in it, you don't see it. You don't see that there's a mountain in front of you, and you don't see that you've put all of these things in your own way,
Yeah.
and that there's a way around it, and you just think that's normal, you know? And
Yes.
so I think the only, you're saying that people come to you and saying, I don't know what I want, figure it out for me. It's like, that's kind of what you do though, is you talk through it with them, and that's the only way you can figure out and see for the first time, like, oh no, there's a giant mountain that I put in my own path. Like, what am I going to do about this? Wait, I have to work through that in order to get to the other side. Okay, cool. I guess we have a place to start,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think the more you do it, and I think, Lisa, like looking at the Himalayas or whatever, I mean, people climb the Himalayas on purpose, right? Like they do it on purpose. And I think it's also like making that our purpose. Like, I'm going to get to the base camp because I think it feels good, actually, right? Like, it feels good to like hit these moments of realization, and like, oh, I'm doing it. Like, I'm waking up in the morning and I'm not like putting all this pressure on myself. I'm like, okay, what am I going to do?
It really does feel good. I mean, I'd had it before in work, but I definitely didn't have it anymore when we started working together. And I was like, I want it back, but I just thought that those days are probably gone. I was too old. I got kids. It wasn't allowed anymore. I don't know. I don't know what I thought. But yeah.
Yeah.
Here we go again.
Right. I know. It's so, I mean, this is the part I love, right? Is when you kind of get to that moment where you're like, it's really fucking hard. And also it's really fucking gratifying, where it's like, I'm kind of like, every time I kind of hit that moment where I'm like, oh, this is one of those moments. Like, I can't wait to like start the process and like get through it. Like, it's going to be hard, but also it's going to be amazing. Like, it feels so much better to be over here than to be banging my head against the wall, just continually causing myself pain.
Like, I'm not always entirely sure what I'm doing, but I'm doing it. And hey, look, I managed to get a really long way.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Very exciting.
Amazing. Yeah. All right. Well, I will let you both go. Thanks so much for being here. And I will send out the recording.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
All
Have a nice
right.
evening,
Thank you
guys.
both.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.